Welcome everyone to the StartmeupHK Salons virtual events. My name is Jamilat Kano and I'm going to be your MC for the festival. As you know, the StartmeupHK Salons is a global initiative by the StartmeupHK team. Together with the InvestHK overseas offices, they want to push their initiatives and promote the StartmeupHK in the local startup communities. We are going to have 6 overseas salons targeted into very specific markets. And that's why we have the ASEAN offices joining us today. Hello Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand. We're also connecting all the way to Europe with the Brussels office, London, and Berlin. Salut Brussels, ça va? My name is Jamilat. We're going to have the North American edition with the offices in Toronto, hi Canada, New York, and San Francisco. South American edition with the office in Chile, hola Chile, ¿cómo están? And Brazil, A to the bone, and Mexico. We have Middle East and India offices with Mumbai joining together. And we also have the Greater Bay Area office in Guangzhou. Dajia, how are you everyone? And of course, our attendees here in Hong Kong. Thank you very much for joining. So I hope you enjoy, connect, support, network, and promote. See you soon at all our events. Our next panel will be the Startup Panel. We will be showcasing successful startups that have decided to set business here in Hong Kong or have moved to the city to have a greater reach in the regional China market. For this, we're going to be introducing our moderator, Ben Wong, who is the head of Open Innovation for Eureka Nova, a new world development company. So please welcome Ben.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for logging into today's startup panel. And this is Invest Hong Kong StartmeupHK startup panel, and we have a very diverse group of panelists and startups. Everyone here is from all parts of the world and also doing very different things. I myself is from the US, and I'm here running a corporate innovation platform. But I'd like to also quickly ask everyone here on the panel to introduce yourselves, where you're from, what you're doing, and we'll do kind of a rapid fire introduction. So I'll start with Ryan.
Hi, my name's Ryan Kim. I'm Korean American, and I'm representing Rice Robotics. I'm the COO. We build autonomous service robots. So we have 3 different types of robots: a delivery robot, security robot, and patrol robot. And all of them can navigate, take elevators, and charge without help.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Garner and I'm from Canada and moved to Hong Kong in 2007. I'm the founder and CEO of Retycle, and Retycle is an online platform for buying and selling secondhand kids and maternity wear.
Hi everyone, I'm Dorothy. I'm mostly from Hong Kong, a bit of US and Canada as well. Started Dream Impact in 2017, co-founder and chief catalyst, really a platform for impact resource bridging, helping social startups and NGOs to bridge with impact resources such as impact investors, corporates, and etc.
Hello everybody, my name is Vittorio. I'm executive chairman and co-founder of VeloTrade. At VeloTrade, we set up a digital platform to allow investors to access trade finance assets. So on one side of the transaction, we have corporates looking for working capital solutions in the form of invoice discounting, invoice financing, e-commerce financing, purchase order financing, and so on. And the capital is provided, as I said, by institutional investors, which can be anywhere. And they're generally high net worth individuals, family offices, hedge funds, and asset managers.
Great, thank you, Vittorio. Thank you, everyone. Today's panel really is meant to be informative for our audience that are calling in from all over the world. And many of these companies are startups, entrepreneurs, they already have companies, and they're looking to evaluate if Hong Kong is a place for them to set up a company. So I have my first question to kick this off is for Sarah and Vittorio. You being from overseas, looking into Hong Kong, why did you choose Hong Kong as your starting point for your startup? I'll start off with Sarah.
I had already been here for about 10 years by the time I had the idea for my own business. But at that point, I was familiar with Hong Kong enough to know that it was a place that I wanted to stay and continue to build my life. It had been good to me in terms of a corporate career and setting up a life here. And I had heard great things about the ability to set up a startup with ease here. And I, of course, knew that the taxation was very easy and even easier and lower rates for corporates. So both of those things combined made, I guess, the accessibility and the apprehension very low about getting started. And I think just wanting to continue life here was a big reason. And then, of course, the problem that I was endeavoring to solve in terms of the business proposition was not solved in this market and also in Asia beyond, but particularly in Hong Kong. So it was a ripe opportunity as well.
Thanks, Sarah. And the theme there is being able to set up very quickly here in Hong Kong. And is that the same case for you, Victorio? What's your view?
Yes, it is. But for us is also the point that trade finance has suddenly become a very relevant asset class. Until now, it's been monopolized by traditional financial institutions. And so any institutional investor that wants to access trade finance could not do it. So our platform, on the one hand, allows investors to access trade finance, but more importantly, we act as a bridge between the rest of the world and Asia. So we are the only SFC-regulated trade finance platform, and that, of course, gives a lot of comfort. So if you're an investor sitting in London or New York and you want to diversify, you look at Asia, and it's a great place to find assets. There is geographical distance, there are cultural barriers, language barriers. So the investor is somewhat intimidated by accessing these markets directly. So having as a counterpart somebody like us, regulated again, that speaks the same language as the investor, but has the teams on the ground that can originate, evaluate, run KYC, due diligence on the assets, gives enormous comfort to the investor and allows them to access such assets. So we are a bridge. And the platform, of course, is digital, so by definition, we don't have any geographical constraint. But the reality is that most of the flow that we serve are suppliers generally based in Asia and debtors who are in US and Europe.
And it sounds to me, Victoria, that you have quite a high floor to work with, meaning that the foundation for you to get set up, not only quickly, but the access to resources to get your fintech to accelerate very quickly was readily available in the market, right?
Absolutely. I mean, Hong Kong has been a great place for us. It's geographically, of course, extremely well located, but also has international recognition as a fully functional international center. So when you're talking to institutional investors around the world and you mention Hong Kong, you mention a bank account in Hong Kong, it's just taken for granted that is a safe jurisdiction to work in.
Great, thank you. And I like to pose the same questions to Dorothy and Rhyme. So far, it's been ease and resources in terms of accessibility here in Hong Kong. Is that the same case for you, Dorothy?
I would say also as a platform ourselves, we also work with different resources and funders. And I think I would like to plug a few partners as well, including Angel Hub, being the first and only licensed equity crowdfunding platform in Hong Kong, really been able to help a lot of startups in Hong Kong raise funds. Social Ventures Hong Kong, they've been supporting ventures with the social mission startup for the past 10 years. Some of them, namely Green Monday, you might have heard of them. They just raised a lot of funding for alternative protein. And I think they're also working with corporates now on their business strategies. So I think in terms of startups wanting to be plugged into the ecosystem, there are definitely a lot of resources. And without the experience, I would say working with universities, their knowledge transfer departments. So if you were to come to Hong Kong and you want to reach out to UST, CUHK, Hong Kong U, their knowledge transfer departments have great resources from professors who do deep tech research that actually wants to be commercialized. So then a lot of founders can be able to access that knowledge quickly. I would say lastly, also the government has great funding as well, including the Green Tech Fund, and also something might not a lot of people know is the Tech Task program, which is the talent admissions program. So they actually sponsor international talents through the Science Park and the Cyberport programs for startups that want. I think talent being one of the main assets of a startup, that's a really great asset. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Dorothy. And that's pretty close to what I do as well, Dorothy, in terms of you're just opening up the discussion now about, Hong Kong is always seen as a fintech hub or, a great place to start your e-commerce companies. But now it's also opening up to new industries, like you mentioned, in green tech and social enterprises. So that's really exciting to see. And with the foundation of government being able to give the green tech fund, that's pretty exciting for this market at the moment, right? And over to robotics, to Ryan, what are your thoughts in terms of resources available, or what has been very helpful for you here setting up in Hong Kong?
So we were previously located at Cyberport, but we are currently located at Hong Kong Science Park. And actually, the Science Park introduced us to our first client. So that was really amazing. And they still help us with some of our BD. Our first customer was Lotel Island South, now known as Nina Hotel, and we have 3 robots that are there. They've been there for over a year now, and so yeah, it's been really directly helpful. I think other benefits of being in Hong Kong. So our startup, Rice Robotics, has some roots at CUHK. I mean, the science park is right next to CUHK. Several of our first core members went to this university. And so we just made 2 new soon-to-be graduate hires, and one is graduating from CUHK and the other is graduating from HKU. So we find that being in Hong Kong at Science Park, we have access to talent and also support from the organization.
That's awesome. And now you're touching, I'm glad this panel is kind of touching on all factors of resources available. You're talking about students, essentially, and the schools being able to provide the right type of curriculum that segments them into the right types of industries that are growing here in Hong Kong. That's great. So, we spoke about Hong Kong and the resources available, and there are tons. I think anyone that's been in Hong Kong before, you know for a fact that I like to say the floor is high, the ceiling's even higher, right? But everyone that comes to Hong Kong is not just for Hong Kong, right? I mean, we look at the market dynamics that Hong Kong provides in terms of opportunities. So I like to kind of ask from a market dynamic perspective, Victorio, Hong Kong's one market, but there are others regionally. What does GBA represent to you? What do other markets mean to you while you're here in Hong Kong?
Well, Hong Kong for sure is a hub, and having GBA expands the reach. So again, technology helps as well. So physically, we don't need to be everywhere, but being in Hong Kong allows us to reach the region. So we have offices in Shenzhen, Taipei, and we're planning to, I mentioned Vietnam, but the idea is to, Hong Kong on the one hand is a great gateway for China. So that's of course the largest, not the easiest, but the largest market available. So is allowing us to push on that front, but at the same time is a great place to access the rest of Southeast Asia. So it's kind of the ideal solution, and all these GBA events are making that access infinitely easier.
Great. And when we say the GBA, we really mean these guys are really our neighbors, right? You get into the Kowloon station and you hop on a speed train. Pre-COVID, you'll get there, I remember, 11 minutes. You're in Shenzhen, which is quite an amazing feat. Before it's 45 minutes to take a bus into Shenzhen, into the hardware capital of the world. And I think, Victoria, you expanding on, it's just not about just Hong Kong, GBA. You've been able to set up in Taiwan and other regions very quickly as well. And the flight to Taiwan is
45 minutes.
45 minutes. So I think that is a great kind of opportunity that Hong Kong does provide in terms of all the different markets in such a short period of time. Same question for you, Ryan. I know that you guys are now quite full on here in Hong Kong. What does the market mean to you regionally for you?
Yeah, so you mentioned the proximity to Shenzhen, for example. As a robotics company, being close to being in the GBA, being part of the GBA, and having that close access to all the factories is really beneficial. It's so much faster for us to iterate and create new products. We don't have a language barrier when we're speaking to our factories, and so it's really great for robotics companies. I think being in Hong Kong, we're also expanding into the greater APAC region. So Japan is also a major market for us, and we are also just getting started in Thailand. And we plan to expand in other APAC countries such as Korea, Singapore, Australia. So we're in talks with projects in all sorts of countries in the region. And we'll be expanding in the greater GBA in terms of our business development as well.
Thank you. And let's stay on this topic a little longer. For you, Dorothy, what does Hong Kong and GBA dynamics? What's the difference? What's the opportunity there?
I think for impact, scene is quite interesting space. There's definitely more exchange in terms of social innovation models and systems that we can think about, but in terms of cultural and political climate, it's quite different. And so I think the market dynamic is quite different. But we've had a few exchange tours with students from GBA or from China. What we've also talked a lot about is the human-centricness of Hong Kong and how I think in our startup community, we are not just focused on the technology, but we really focus on building the community. And so that's something that they think, that GBA could also mirror in a way. We're not just looking at tech acceleration, we're not just looking at hardware and software, but also at the humanware, right? How can we, I think that's the strength of Hong Kong, and how building those relationships would mean we'll create long-term value for the startups in different communities.
Right, and I like to kind of a little bit expand on it a bit, right? Before COVID, I would go to Shenzhen on a weekly basis, and I think some of the infrastructure variables that make a startup community grow are these little community events. And I have to say, the ones in Shenzhen, the ones here in Hong Kong, they're very valuable and they're very different. And there's like very different type of people over at the border that's very engineering minded. Let's get things done. I could get a prototype up and running in 2 days, just because they have access to a lot of resources there. In the meantime, here in Hong Kong is the access to the market foundation of rule of law, the ability to get yourself settled here and open up international hub into different markets. That was a different dynamic that Hong Kong brings to the table as well, right? So that's really exciting to see. And for Sarah. Correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm looking at Retackle, you're looking specifically in Hong Kong market, right? And what does that pose for you? And are you looking at expanding your business?
Yeah, we've been operating in Hong Kong now for a little over 4 years. And the intent was really to build out the product market fit and make sure that we had everything running as well as it could be with technology and team and setting up the foundations. The intent was always to replicate in other Asian markets. COVID put a little bit of a halt on our plans last year, but we are soft launching Singapore in September. And really felt that Hong Kong was a good hub again to create that product market fit and then create a blueprint for new markets. In my corporate life, we opened many new markets, and so I have a sense of the cultural nuances and the steps that are required to make those expansion moves, and always saw Hong Kong as a good place to centralize but be able to replicate from.
Yeah, amazing. And that kind of segues into our next set of questions, right? COVID is obviously here. Things are looking like it's getting better. We have these really neat, cool little masks on. How did you maneuver during the COVID? It's been a year and a half. In this COVID market, call it. Sarah, how did you maneuver your company to be doing better than it is, stabilize, working new ideas? Can you share a bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, it was, I think, for all of us, an exercise in adaptability and resilience, particularly with any business. But the beginning, I think, was all about stability and making sure that we could continue and that we could survive this. So basically shoring up survival skills and also looking for support. So in the beginning, there was so much uncertainty that we did look for government support, and the government was offering support quite freely and readily from almost the beginning of COVID. So we looked at getting grants and secured grants to shore up basically our cash flow in the beginning of COVID. And then we luckily persevered and also accelerated our business. We almost doubled our business through COVID. And that was a result of a lot of changes and accelerations in our online strategy. So we really accelerated our online plays, and we moved away from more of our omni-channel offline online presence through COVID and just focused on online. And Hong Kong has made a big shift to online through COVID. So e-commerce was a little bit slower to pick up in this market because shopping offline is extremely convenient. So the conveniences of online weren't really recognized. And then through COVID, there's been a very fast adoption to online. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and that's something that Hong Kong's been trying to tackle for the longest time, right? Because when we look at the e-commerce place, everyone always thought e-commerce is kind of tough in Hong Kong because it's so convenient. Downstairs, there's a 7-Eleven in every block, right? So that COVID has kind of put kind of a big lens on what does e-commerce and tech offer the community here. And then why don't I throw that same question over to you, Victorio?
For us, COVID, initially, everything pretty much stopped. Suppliers were in lockdown, investors were terrified, not understanding what was happening. But then as the situation evolved, there are three factors that actually contributed extremely positively to our business, and 2021 is going to be a massive positive inflection point for us. And the three elements are: one, central banks have slashed rates to zero, so on short-end assets, there's really nothing that offers a return comparable to what our assets offer. The second point is that some of our suppliers have actually done extremely well as a result of COVID, especially the ones that are selling to buyers that have an online access. So we have some of our suppliers have multiplied their turnover by 2, 3, 4 times. And the third element is that traditional financial institutions haven't really followed. So suddenly we become extremely relevant, and many of the suppliers turn to us to help them propel the growth. And I guess a fourth element is that all the companies that were in our space that initially just pushed for volume without really creating sound foundations have faced big issues in terms of asset deterioration, losses, and so on. We're very proud to be still at zero default, no delays, because we created that infrastructure that allowed us to sail through the difficult times, and we're reaping the benefits now. So a kind of a perfect storm. And Hong Kong has been extremely helpful to help us sail through the tough time at the beginning of last year.
Yeah, so in short, you're kind of, there was obviously a challenge, and you saw a huge opportunity as a result as well, and you've been able to strive in that situation, right? Why don't I ask the same question to you, Dorothy?
Yeah, just also wanted to build on top of the two speakers, on adaptability and how even the structure of financing, even for impact, we also saw, we need to rethink the way we finance impact. And it's not just looking at traditional growth the way that we can see, but also looking at how we can zero interest loans to help the startups to bridge certain funding gaps, and also perhaps we can look at invoice financing so that people can actually not just look at their 10 times growth, but also the impact that they're creating. And that helped a lot of startups in COVID also to transition. And I think the mindset of adaptability is so important. We couldn't wait. This is the new normal, right? I think since last May, we were already thinking we need to have innovations right away. And thinking about industries that really are core to people's lives, like education, sustainability, and that's people, and the rise of awareness for ESG is definitely has shifted the whole awareness towards that, and we saw increase in demand for these companies as well.
Great. And we could really dive into that so deep, and what COVID represented. But I'll say this, as an open innovation platform, we work with several startups in the space. And I'll say I'm surprised. I'm surprised that, in the beginning, we thought that there will be a lot of challenging times. Because I think in general, startups are strapped in a bit, right? And we've been able to see at the same time a lot of startups take this opportunity as a challenge, and they've been doing really well. And that goes back to kind of the theme, right? Hong Kong has been able to kind of create this high floor, and now that they've seen this challenge and they've kind of taken off and running away with it, it's great to see. We have to start wrapping things up a little bit, and I kind of want to ask two questions in one, and I'll just kind of go down the line here, right? In terms of the first question is, what trends do you see in entrepreneurship in Hong Kong that are going to happen? Maybe one or two of that. And if you could also give, any last words for people who are calling in internationally, that's evaluating Hong Kong as a market for them to start, what would that be, right? So I'll throw that over to you, Rhyme. Trends, why Hong Kong, in terms of, any last words for them?
Sure. I can talk a bit about the industry I'm in, I guess.
Yeah.
I think a trend that we'll continue to see is robots in more regular spaces. So not just robots in warehouses, but robots in everyday life, like malls, offices, residences, hospitals. So that's a trend I'm seeing. And for us, property developers have been actually looking at adopting robots for the past 1 to 3 years. And from the management level, this has been an initiative that we've realized. So yeah, hope to believe that we will continue to see more and more of that. And a message that I would leave to audience is probably, I think there's, because we're in the GBAs, there's not that many just Hong Kong bred robotics companies and startups. So we hope that Rice Robotics is an example of that's possible. You can have a team with all your software engineers, all your hardware, your electronics engineers and everything in Hong Kong and have a successful robotics startup.
Awesome, thank you. Over to you, Sarah.
I might follow on the trend that's related to my industry, but we are seeing a massive shift in Hong Kong around sustainability. I think there's been a mindset shift that was galvanized through COVID, where the urgency is now, and people are actually making concerted lifestyle changes, both personally but also corporately. And so we're seeing that trend emerge, and also support for social enterprises. So the whole ecosystem around sustainability and social enterprises really accelerating. And I think I would also go on to what Dorothy said earlier in terms of the human aspect. I think the community here is getting stronger and stronger month by month, year by year. And where it used to be sort of grassroots, ground roots startups, now that whole ecosystem is maturing. And I think there's a lot of place for more mature companies to thrive in Hong Kong as well.
Awesome, thank you. Over to you, Dorothy.
I would say ESG and impact integration in terms of even listed companies all the way to startups. Like all asset classes, all companies will need to do this, and we're seeing that. And also from startup to scale up, I see a lot of Hong Kong companies, in the past 10 years, we've incubated a lot of startups. I think they're now scaling up their businesses as well. And in terms of why Hong Kong, I would say Hong Kong is a great example for urban solutions. And I think, in 2050, more than 70% of people will be urbanized in the whole globe. So we need to start looking at urban solutions. And so Hong Kong being a great example for these startups to grow. And then I think, this can scale to different urban cities around the world.
Awesome, thank you. And last but not least.
Thank you. From my perspective, trade finance is becoming an asset class in its own respect. I think within 2-3 years, people will be talking about equity, foreign exchange, fixed income, and trade finance. And so Asia is always going to be a massive source of origination. So Hong Kong, as the main financial center in this region, is always going to attract interest and focus. So I think that's the big trend, and we'll see more and more asset managers look at Hong Kong as the place to source assets. And just a last word on Hong Kong as a center, it's great in terms of geographical location, as we mentioned, But at the same time, for those who are looking from far away, I would urge to pay also attention to cultural differences around the region. So what we've found is it's actually a barrier to entry, but it also creates a defensible position once you are there, because it's not that easy to replicate a business model that works in one region, in one of the countries, and just copy paste across the region. You really need to understand how that country functions. From our perspective as a financial institution, each regulatory environment is very different. But once you've managed to conquer that region, you can really grow and establish yourself, and being somewhat less concerned about a new entrant coming and expanding across the region, because it's not as easy as it sounds.
Great, thank you. And that wraps up just about our startup panel. I'll say this: even though Hong Kong is this very dynamic international city, we are also a small town in a startup community, and I feel that I could speak on our behalf that we're pretty welcoming to all different companies that come to Hong Kong, and we're very reachable. So to the audience, if you have any questions, I do feel that we are ambassadors of Hong Kong and the startup ecosystem. Please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you for dialing in, calling in, viewing. Thank you.
Wow, this has been an amazing journey. And thank you very much for connecting with us. I'm sure you have created and built strong relationships around the startup ecosystem. If you want to know more about the ecosystem, please make sure to connect with the StartmeupHK team. And hopefully I can see you next year so we can learn more about what's happening in innovation, startup, and anything around our ecosystems. So see you next year. My name is Jamilet. Thank you.